Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Hello, and this is Peter Robbins, and welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. If you are listening to this show now but would prefer to watch it, simply go to YouTube and type in KGRA, then enter Meanwhile Here on Earth. You can also access all of our previous broadcasts at that location. Become a KGRA subscriber and you can listen to or watch anything and everything in KGRA's massive archive, hundreds and hundreds of shows on UFOs and so many areas of the paranormal. Normally at this point, before I bring on our guest, I give a little monologue on this, that, or the other thing. It's been a fairly routine week for me. I have no special gripes to air to you or things to direct your attention otherwise, so let's move right to it. Our guest tonight. For more than 20 years, Richard Dolan has been one of the best-known researchers, UFO researchers in the world. He is the author of groundbreaking books in the field that have opened up fresh ways of understanding this perplexing subject. His massive 2-volume history, UFOs and the National Security State, permanently altered our understanding of the rich history of UFOs and the cover-up of this reality by government and military agencies around the world, and especially within the United States. He also is co-author of the classic book AD, After Disclosure, along with co-author Bryce Zabel. To this day, this book still is the only book-length attempt to analyze the potential end of UFO secrecy and what it might mean to the world, literally on a day-to-day basis. His book UFOs and the 21st Century Mind, for the 21st Century Mind, remains the best single volume that I'm aware of, discussing the full range of the UFO subject matters in all its complexity, written in clear and easy to understand prose. A perfect book for the experienced reader's library and for folks who are entry level in this field. His most recent book, which I have my copy of right here and I'm almost done with, The Alien Agendas, is another unique contribution to the subject, being one of the few attempts to analyze the beings behind the UFO phenomena by examining the long history of encounters with them. And I should add here that Richard does something rather unique in this book. And he makes it clear up front that he is speculating in a number of areas that he talks about, but his speculation is so well informed that, again, whether you are new to the subject or you've been involved for decades, it's a must for your library. I really put it in a unique category. Now, aside from being one of ufology's most engaging writers, Richard has been in front of the camera and microphone for many years, speaking to audiences around the world. He is the host of the long-running Richard Dolan Show, usually weekly podcast for KGRA, and his YouTube channel. He also appears on countless television programs, including Ancient Aliens, Hangar One, UFOs, The Lost Evidence, and many others. He's also written and hosted the television series False Flags, which you can find on Gaia TV, and has written recently and been featured in an extended series relating to the UFO phenomena entitled History of Aerial Phenomena, And this is scheduled also to run on Gaia TV. These days, Richard is engaged in writing his third volume of UFOs in the National Security State, bringing the history of UFOs up to the present day. Meanwhile, he manages his website, richarddolansmembers.com. I'll repeat that again later. Do consider joining it. It's one of the most informative UFO-based locations on the internet. It features fresh writing, video, audio content by Richard every week. With that, Richard M. Dolan, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Hi, Peter. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. One thing you didn't mention in that intro is that you and I have been very close friends for almost 20 years. And it's always a great pleasure for me to get together with you, whether on a program like this or just on the phone or when I drive out to your house in Ithaca and hang out for a few days.
Yeah.
So it's always good. And it's just a great pleasure to be here with you.
Well, this is historic for me because I think about all of the conversations we've had in our travel history alone together of coming and going from conferences, almost always in your car. And of course, being us, we sit for hours in silence, never having anything to say to each other. I've had people say, I would pay to be in that back seat. We have traded so many stories. We've thought out loud to each other on so many things over the years.
Yes.
We've spent time with each other's families. My late dad absolutely adored you. I know you considered him a real friend.
I did.
You are a historian. My dad lived through a lot of history. And this is the first time I'm getting to interview you in all the years officially. You know, we've been friends. It
was fun for me to prepare for this.
Yeah.
Because you had me to go through all of my old photographs. And it was, wow, what an experience that was. So it'll be fun to share these with the world.
Yeah. I also, you had been on my case in a very positive way for quite some time to do an in-depth interview with me on the event that got me involved indirectly, my repressed memory from childhood of my sighting, and more to the point, my sister's experience, which people can visit on the Richard Dolan Show right there on YouTube. And I'm very proud of how many people have watched our interview since it was first posted at the beginning of last month.
You did a great job on that. And it's an amazing story. And if people don't know about it, it's earlier than the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case by 3 months. And it is extraordinary. And it involves gray aliens. And you, Peter, were not taken on board, but you were a witness. Your sister was. And it's an amazing thing to talk about. So yeah, they should check it out.
So let's get going here. I thought, number one, I'm going to hit you with a hard question to start with. I've asked you to prepare. What does the M stand for in Richard M. Dolan?
Michael.
Folks, you heard it here first.
Michael is
Meanwhile Here on Earth breaks the story.
I didn't think that was a secret. I had a grandfather on my mom's side who was named Mike. And yeah, so I think that's what probably got me that middle name.
And that name was passed along to your son.
Yes, indeed. Whose middle name is Richard, by the way. That was a neat little twist. He's Michael R. Dolan, my son.
Wow, that would work out especially good for somebody like me who's dyslexic.
He never uses that middle initial or name ever, I notice.
Let's go back before the beginning.
Yeah,
you really do have one of the most remarkable minds, and I'm constantly enthralled by things that you're thinking through or handling in a way that another person might not, or going deeper. Some time back, you did, a standard learn about your heritage DNA kind of test, and
oh yes,
you
Ancestry.com.
There you go. Would you like to share a little of it without taking up the entire show?
Yeah, I'll be quick.
Better known.
What's amazing?
Ancestors.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. So my father, whose name was Richard Thomas Dolan, he died in early December of 2018. So not that long ago. My dad and I were close. Well, I'll probably talk a bit about him. And the thing about my father is he never knew who his father was.
Yeah.
So my dad was born in a very poor family in Brooklyn, New York in 1939. And he was a half brother of all of his other siblings. So he had a different father. His mother and this man never got married, but she gave my dad his last name, which happened to be Dolan. And that's really all that we knew. And all that my father actually knew was that his father's name supposedly was George. So George Dolan. But he had no knowledge of this man, except from my dad's older sister. Apparently this man drank a lot. No surprise back in those days, especially. But he didn't really know anything about him. And my dad always had this anger. He really lived with a tremendous amount of anger and disappointment over never knowing his father. So it was sad. And after he died, like a month after he died, 1 month after he died, I thought, I'm going to get a membership in Ancestry.com. And what I did is you are given tools to research your family tree. Like you can look through records and city records and census data and all of this other stuff. And after 2 weeks of really detailed searching, I found his father. And it was an amazing thing through a series of little clues. And I found that there was a George B. Dolan, who was my father's biological father. But it turns out, it's funny because my dad had always thought this guy was Irish because of the name Dolan. It turns out George B. Dolan was actually not named George. His name was Greenberry Dolan, and he was from Tennessee. And what's interesting is that the name Greenberry or Green was not an unusual name in like the Mid-South for many years in the 19th century, not at all. He was named after his grandfather, Greenberry West, which I should have a picture of that guy because he's a cool looking dude, old Tennessee pioneer. Turns out anyway, and by the way, Greenberry Dolan, my paternal grandfather, turns out fought some serious action in the First World War. And the reason he never was my dad's active father is that he had a wife and son of his own. He had a situation, and I'm not defending that, but that was just the reality of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he served in the First World War, saw some serious action there. And then I was able, through his lineage, to trace, I'm not kidding here, I really got into this, more than 1,000 years back in the ancestry line. I mean, more than 1,000 years, easily, through all. And it's, anyone could probably do this if you get lucky and you get the right lineage where the records are there. And it just so happened I got lucky. So we went back through centuries of English and Scottish lines. And it was just absolutely fascinating. So yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I wish I'd been able to tell my dad, not so much about the ancient history, but his own father.
Yes.
And it was a regret of mine that I didn't do this before my father passed away.
Yeah, one of those ironies we should all not put off till tomorrow what we can do today. And it's not just an adage. Richard, you were born in one of the most famous locations in the world, as I recall, a place called Brooklyn, New York.
You know it, man. Brooklyn, baby.
And your folks moved the small family out to Long Island, to a town called Brentwood. That's where you grew up and came of age. About how old were you when they moved out?
Oh, I was just before starting kindergarten. So I was about 4.5 years old when we moved to Brentwood.
You've talked a lot about your dad over the years, and I'd like to get into some of your thoughts about him, your earliest memories and the like. But first, I only got to meet your mom once, but it was it was love at first sight. And you lost your mom in December, just this past December, to COVID. And again, my
COVID and related complications. It wasn't. But yes.
Yeah, but she was one in a million. And the photos that we're going to look at for me are joyously alive with the love of family. And put this first one up. It just tells the tale. But,
La Familia.
Where point out your mom and dad and you.
Well, my dad's not in this. This is my mother's family. My mother's on the right row, fourth person in.
Okay, yes, I recognize her. Okay.
Yeah. And my Aunt Joan, by the way, her sister is in the foreground on the right side.
Okay.
So they're on the same row there. And next to my great-grandmother, actually. My grandmother is at the head of the table seated. And one of her sisters, several of her sisters are right around her. Yeah, this was so typical of the kind of world that I was born into. You've heard of them. Everyone knows the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Yeah.
I lived that reality, except my people were Italian Americans, not Greek Americans, but they were the in your face, backslapping, like laughing and sometimes yelling, touchy feely, like I love you, I hate you, Italian Americans that I miss to this day. Like I miss that generation. They were just amazing people. And yeah, that's who I was born into. And that's a typical scene, like the big family meal. Everyone gathered around. Like when I was, a kid and grow all through my years, when I would ever visit my mother, that's what we did. It was exactly that kind of situation.
Tell us a bit about your mom. I know we could spend the whole show just
on her. I'm going to try to do that because I still miss her.
Yeah.
If she were on TV, she'd be like funnier than Kramer. If you dropped her into Seinfeld, she would steal the show without breaking a sweat. Like that's the one thing you start with, especially as she got older. Like she was always lively and active throughout her whole life. And she was just filled with like this zest for living. So that was always, we had a neighbor when I was a kid, an older woman named Loretta, who I loved Loretta. She would come over, hang out. And she was a tough lady. She did gardening into her 90s, but she would look at my mother racing around the kitchen and she would say, Barbara, I get tired just looking at you move around the kitchen. And that was my mother. She was just this like constant ball of energy. But as she got older, I think she just stopped caring what other people thought about her. Like, and also I used to joke, I'd say like, she also stopped caring like what other people were even saying because she just had too much on her own mind. I would have conversations with her on a weekly basis for my entire life. Like after I moved out of the house, we always talked. And she would do 90% of the talking. And at times I would say like, do you need me on the other line for this conversation? Like, you want to just have this on your own? Because she could just go. But she was so funny and she was very opinionated, of course, but also like very insightful. So she could be opinionated and you'd be like, okay, fine, mom's just doing her thing. But she was really worth listening to. She was very particularly psychologically keen in assessing people and really getting to the heart of things frequently. And that was an amazing thing, honestly, about her right up to the end.
Yeah. Flashing back a bit in your family,
here we go.
Tell us about this picture.
Yeah, so my mom's at the bottom. She's the little girl there in the front. And those are her two sisters, my Aunt Joan and my Aunt Connie, who's the oldest. And then my grandfather.
Wow.
That's Michael Figondio. That was his name, Figondio. And look at that suit he's wearing, by the way.
I was going to say, nice double-breasted.
These are people who did not have money.
Yeah.
So he looks like he did, but they were my grandfather, in fact, during the Great Depression, which is earlier than this photograph's like 1943, probably. During the Depression, he was so hungry one time, he actually collapsed in the streets of New York.
Oh my God.
And it's just how they lived. It was a very difficult life. These were hardworking people. That's one thing I have to say, and I'm very proud of. Yeah. It was normal at that time. Most of the people of those era were very hardworking. Not that we're not now, but these folks really worked hard. There was not a lot of food on the table that was guaranteed, and it was just a tough existence. But they dressed well. Look at that.
Yeah.
It might be Easter for all I know.
One of the pictures that you sent over, it almost made my jaw drop. It's just, here is a young couple. And, the road ahead is not going to be smooth, but are they on fire?
Those are my mom and dad. Yeah, look, they're good-looking people there, huh?
Yeah.
So my dad, I think he's like 18, and my mom's probably 16, something like that.
Oh, my gosh.
And
were they like high school sweethearts?
yeah, I think. Well, no, not in high school. They went to a different high school, I believe.
Uh-huh.
But so they're in the same neighborhood, and they kind of had mutual friends. And in fact, my dad's friend ended up marrying my Aunt Joan.
Oh,
so they
for
were
God's
buddies,
sake.
and they married the two
Okay.
sisters. And I think that's how it happened. But look at my dad's face. He's like the life of the party there. He's just was filled with all this vitality. And my mom just adores him there.
Absolutely.
Really,
when things were good, they were very good.
when they were good, yeah. And they had a good run. They ended up getting a divorce after 20 years or so of marriage.
Yeah.
And they both remarried. But here they are. This is a really fun picture.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just filled with life.
Yeah.
Just filled with life. That's what I love about it.
Me too. Now we're about to meet a young man here, and very interestingly, he has his life at the moment is being dominated by a book.
That's right. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, it's probably about less than a year old, I think. It's a happy face, isn't it?
Yes.
And I don't, I obviously can't remember that happening, but I remember this picture from way back, and always thought the book on my lap was a fun little foreshadowing of what happened.
Yeah, it could have been a football. It could have been something else, but it's a
Well, there are
book.
lots of old pictures of me with baseball bats. So
Oh, yes, there are.
Some of them are in there, I believe. Oh, yeah. My Winnie the Pooh book. Yeah.
Looking sharp, I might add.
What's that?
Looking sharp.
Thank you. Yes. What I like about that picture is my face and the happiness on it. It's
and
really
it made me think about another thing too. When you look at certain, pictures of people that as very young children, it's like the rubber stamp of their adult face is there but unformed. In other cases, it's like it really hasn't come to fully be yet. And if somebody had a lineup of a dozen pictures of boys this age, relatively the same period, and saying, which one is Richard M. Dolan? I'm not sure I would pick you, because for me, your face it's more generic boy's face and not Richard M. Dolan's face.
Interesting.
Now, that's just me. Here you are. So
yeah, they were sticking baseball bats in my hand at a very early age.
Not in a very much an all-American thing for post-war boys. Your first thoughts about baseball was playing with other boys, or was an iconic famous team like the Dodgers or the Yankees?
My mother actually pointed this out to me. So I do not remember being interested in baseball at that particular age of that photograph. I'm probably 2 or 3 there, maybe 3. I remember though, after we moved out to Long Island, and I had this little tiny black and white TV set that was in the house. And my mother told me when I was about 5 or 6 that I on my own, began obsessively watching baseball games that were on the television.
Oh my!
And I vaguely remember that, but somehow I just got into it. My grandfather, who we saw the picture of earlier, he was a big Yankees fan, New York Yankees fan.
Oh, okay.
He was the Joe DiMaggio generation, and DiMaggio was his guy, and I love my grandfather. So I think I picked up a love of that maybe through him indirectly.
Yeah.
But somehow I just got into it. And I became, as a kid, I was a fanatical baseball fan. Fanatical. A
wonderful early family shot here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're still in Brooklyn here. This is our apartment in Brooklyn. And there's my baby sister, Lisa, and my mom and dad. And I got a nice little crew cut there.
Yeah. Now, at this point, your dad is working as a New York City police officer?
Almost, not yet. He would become a cop, I think, about a year or 2 after this picture.
Okay.
So my dad, he's still in his mid-20s here and was doing electronics work. It was another of his interests. He was a very technically, but no one in my family ever went to college until I did. I was the first. And I think I have a distant cousin who did a 4-year, but for all I know, I was. My dad didn't, my mom didn't, but my dad was a very highly intelligent man who had a lot of interests, and he was a very talented illustrator. He was a good artist. He had very good technical skills, and electronics was one of them. and he had wide-ranging interests, which he shared with me. But yeah, so he was working some kind of electronics gig, and I think was getting tired. I don't know why he left. Maybe he thought it was dead end. He became a cop, I think, in 1967 when I was 5 years old.
I remember you describing his shop and all of the hardware that he had and all the stuff that he was doing later in life. Here is a great family picture. Tell us what's going on here.
Yeah. So I'm in the front there with the nice little black hat. That's me with the hand over my mouth.
Looking sharp.
Yeah. And my cousins. This is Easter. Clearly, this is an Easter Sunday picture. All of the other little kids are cousins of mine.
Right.
They're all around, and I love them to this day. They're wonderful. And in the back is our great grandmother, my mom's grandmother, who we all affectionately called Nana Josie.
Nice.
And I remember her to this day. She died when I was about 10 or 11.
Great face.
She was a sweet lady. Yeah. Very happy Easter picture.
Yeah.
And
I love this one too.
This is Brooklyn, and that's me on the left in the baseball uniform. My sister Lisa is directly next to me. Her face is a little bit blurred out, and these are neighborhood kids.
It's great.
These kids I don't remember.
Yeah.
I remember them generically. Like I remember playing with actually the boy who's facing me.
Yeah,
I do remember him. They lived in the building. This is on Green Avenue in Brooklyn. So our address was 1386 Green Avenue.
Wow.
And I think his building was like exactly next to ours. And somehow we were all hanging out. I love the cars in the background.
Yeah, it's such a classic urban New York kind of shot. It would
1966.
Have to be in Brooklyn. I love it.
Yeah. They're good kids. Well,
here's a wonderful study of you and your sister.
Not my sister. I don't know who this girl is. No. But it is this girl was a daughter of some friends of my parents.
I
think her name was Anna, maybe. I think I vaguely remember. They would come over every once in a while, and we were friends. Because we were the same age and we'd play.
Yeah.
But that's just a really nice picture. I like that picture a lot. It's a sweet kids picture study. Now we've moved out to Long Island in this photo. So that's my great grandmother, Nana Josie, with on her lap, and my grandmother, who's got Lisa, my sister, on her lap. And again, what I love about this is I grew up in a family of very strong women.
Yeah.
I mean, strong men too, absolutely. But it always seemed that like my family gatherings were always dominated by the women. And I feel very lucky because both of these ladies, I mean, they were so affectionate.
Yes.
And they just gave love so readily. They were a real rock and foundation, as my mother was as well. I have to include her to my formation and my and all of the lives of like my sisters and our cousins as well. Like we just adored. We almost turned like our grandmother into this kind of like family worship idol, like you must worship grandma because she was just that amazing. And to this day, my cousins and I, we actually do. We place her on this highest pedestal. We just love her.
I'm happy to say that sounds so familiar. You and I are both so lucky to come from families, modest means, but the expression of love. And you think about the impact of later life and how nothing can replace that. No matter what you're going through,
That's
you
so
have
true.
that in your grounding, and we are truly blessed like that. Here's another photo that totally captures it.
Oh, well, this is much later, but I wanted to include this here. This is my mother on the left, of course, my grandmother, and my two sisters, Nancy in the foreground and Lisa in the back, and my grandfather in the back. That was possibly his last photograph.
I see. Yes.
He died about 2 weeks after this picture.
Oh my
So this is
goodness.
1980. We've done a quick fast forward. But I love this because just look at those faces. Like everyone is
The best.
beaming, including my grandfather in the background there.
Yeah.
It's just this. And that to me, if I were to really think about, what does my family mean to me?
Yeah.
And as growing up, like that picture.
Yeah.
is what it is. I'm not even in the picture. I don't care. It's like these are the people that I love.
Yeah.
And this is really how we were.
Sometimes in life, this is as good as it gets. And it's a cliche that money can't buy you love, but some of the most unhappy people I have ever met as adults came from very privileged families where they don't even remember ever being kissed by their mother or anything more than a handshake from their father. And the damage done is incalculable.
Yeah, I also have friends like that, and it's sad because everyone's got problems in their life, and I'm no exception. But that was not one of them, and I'm very grateful. This picture, okay, so this is funny. Look what I'm wearing. First of all,
there's got to be a caption for this.
So, but I've said this one because there's Lisa, of course, in the foreground. This is our new backyard after we moved out to the country. Yeah, as my Aunt Lorraine would put it. We're going to get to Lorraine, don't worry.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we're in this little suburban neighborhood in Brentwood, Long Island.
Yeah.
There's Lisa. And look so I've got the black socks pulled up to the knee.
You are totally
summertime. We're talking summertime. I got the shirt collar buttoned to the top. And my mother would marvel at me. Like, my mother didn't dress me like this. This is all me. This is all my craziness. My mother would be like, I look around at other kids, they're half naked in the street, shirts are open, and here you are, you're buttoning up your collar. My mother would be like, what is up with you? And I don't know, like, this is just how I could be. So it's hilarious. And of course, we never present baseball.
And the counterpoint, like, Mom, look how Richie is dressed.
Yeah, totally. Probably.
And
totally nuts.
There is a great portrait. There is
I love this one. I love this picture. I'm 6 years old here.
This is where, for me, okay, I get this is a young Richard M. Dolan starting to emerge.
Good.
And my question for you is, we all master reading at a different point. For me, a little later than many kids because of my dyslexia. I was about 8 before I really got into it, and then good luck stopping me. About when in your life did you master reading? And once you were able to start to read, go to the kids section in the library or whatever, or start to build a little library yourself, what were the books that attracted you? About what age did you start?
What a great question. A little earlier than this, of course. So I think even 4 or 5, I was getting little kids' books.
Yeah.
Again, very basic kids' books.
Sure.
I do remember Clifford the Big Red Dog when I was maybe 5, reading that and being very proud that I was getting through it and kind of figuring it out. Yeah. So probably around that time, when, a little older than this, when I was like 7, by the time I was 7, I was definitely considered a good student in my classes, and I was reading all the time. I think by that point, my parents realized, this kid's a little different. Well, actually, my mother would say she knew right away, but certainly by the time I was 6 and 7, my parents, we had no money, but they invested in libraries for me, so that we'd get these book clubs that were available in those days, and they enrolled me in science book clubs, history book clubs. Yeah, so I would get these. Like for kids, age appropriate books.
That's great.
Some of them I remember would have these little stickers. You'd put the stickers in there. Kind of a cool little idea. But I read them all. And so I developed a real love, even when I was like 7, for science and for history, both.
Okay.
My whole life.
That's what I wanted to know. Now, once again.
Here we go.
Looking good, man.
I was probably 7, 8, 7, I think. Mets cap. There's another one with Yankees caps. I've got a big first baseman's glove, which was the first glove my parents bought for me. Why would they get me a first baseman's mitt? I don't know. And a softball.
Yeah. And
it's a real wooden bat now. I was graduating from the plastic to the wooden. And that's in our front yard and in our neighborhood in Brentwood.
Formidable.
Yeah, I was very happy playing.
Now, this is got to be somebody's first Holy Communion, or else
my sisters. So I would never take my baseball hats off.
I was gonna say, Have you ever looked more geeky in your life? That collar, you could take off and fly with it. It's just wonderful. And that affectation of, I don't know about other kids, but I button the top button. Holy moly.
Oh, again with the button. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. So I would be 9 years going on 10, I think.
Yeah.
There's my mom and dad, both still looking very good. My sister, Lisa, looks very proud and happy. And there's Nancy, being very cute. And me with, the shirt tucked in, the button all the way to the top, and that proud Yankees hat. Never take it off.
At about this point in your life, dreaming of the future and the world opening to you, what were some of your thoughts about what you might want it to be when, as we euphemistically used to say, when you grew up? Yeah,
I'll tell you, I had a real hero complex as a kid. And by that, I mean, I had a wicked driving ambition. I mean, it was really off the charts. That's the truth. Now, back then, I thought I'll be a baseball star.
Classic.
And I would replay like the bottom of the 9th grand slam home run that wins the World Series. And I would actually do the whole thing, and I'd race around the yard going home. Like, I did all of that. Probably like millions of other kids. But I didn't really know what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Truthfully. But I will say that I was very, by this point in my life, I was very intellectually assertive, and I would even say almost aggressive. I mean, in a kind of a weird way. Like, when I was this is something I'm willing to talk about here. When I was very young, in those earlier pictures that we saw, I was actually a really frightened kid. I was afraid of a lot of things. And I've often wondered, like, what it was to a degree that is unusual. Like, you don't see, like, little kids can be scared of things, but I would say I took it to a very strong level. And I look back, and I'm not trying to lay blame here, but I think my father had a big part of that. My dad, I love my dad, and we became very close, really, for my whole life. Yeah. But my dad had problems. You know, I mentioned he didn't have his own father. And my dad couple of times said things like, I was born angry. And he had a lot of anger issues. He had a bad temper. And especially, I'm just going to say this, especially when he drank. Yeah. My father did drink. And to the point where, you know, I've often wondered, it's been a discussion with my sisters, like, was he an out and out alcoholic or borderline alcoholic? And you could say borderline, because he actually ended up stopping drinking without doing a 12-step even. And he was able to put it aside years later. But I will just say it ended up wrecking the marriage, and it caused a huge amount of anxiety and fear in the family. Like, he would break furniture, and he would say the most horrible things to my mother at times. Like, when he drank, it was always when he drank, like, you had to watch out for him. Yeah. He was scary. And so for me, as a scared kid, I think that clearly my earliest memories of him, I was afraid of my father. Yeah. I remember this. But what happened was, when I was about 5 or 6, something different happened. It was my father looked at this scared, skinny little kid of his, and I think he wanted to teach me confidence. Yeah. And so we started to wrestle and fight. Yeah. And this, I think, was a very healthy thing, and I'm so grateful that we ended up doing this. But my dad actually taught me how to fight, like, for real. And because the neighborhood I grew up in Brentwood was, I mean, it wasn't like thug central, but there were a lot of tough kids there, and there were a lot of fights, and there were a lot of boys I went to school with. I have no doubt they ended up going to jail and prison.
I was going to say, to cut you off for one moment, I think a lot of people who think they know who you are, who read your books and, you know, follow, and that they think of you as an intellectual and, you know, a rather heady person, but you got in more than your share of fights as a kid.
Many. When you're a kid, like, you keep track of these things. I can't remember most of them now, but I know as a kid, I remembered knowing that I had more than 25, like, fights with other boys and a couple of girls. There were a lot of tough girls in our neighborhood, especially when I was younger, but mostly in and out of school. And The thing was, yeah, what the reason for it was, I think I play a lot of sports with a lot of these kids, but I was very skinny, and I was always the honor student. Like I was the smart kid in the group. And I firmly believe, yeah, like a lot of the other tougher kids would look at me and see me as an easy target. Like, who's that skinny kid playing shortstop, thinking that they could get over on me. But the thing was, I was the one skinny honor student shortstop that I wouldn't back down. Like I just wouldn't. My father actually drilled this into me. This is the thing. And he didn't just teach me how to fight, like physically, but he taught me mentally. Like he said, when you're in a group of kids, how do you stand up to them? How do you identify the leader and take out the lead? Like he would teach me these things. I'm like, God Almighty. He would teach me moves he learned as a cop. And one time, this is almost insane when I think about it. He said, I was probably 7 years old. He's like, all right, so let me tell you, if I see you having a fight with some kid and you're getting your ass kicked and you're not defending yourself, I'm just going to let him do it. But if I see you defending yourself, I'll go out and I'll help you. I'm like, okay, Dad. I'm like, all right. Like that, I'm not kidding you. So, like you can look back like, what a horrible father, or you can say, that's good advice. And for me, I look back and I see all of these fights that I was engaged in, so many. And some where I really got hurt. And some where I was totally wrong. I was totally in the wrong. I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Peter?
It occurs to me that as a well-known figure in a controversial field, people have come at you irregularly since you've emerged as a presence in the field of ufology, and you've never taken criticism sitting down. You're a very good debater. You're very good at making your points, and if somebody is accusing you or coming at you in a way that you can take them down intellectually, you do. It kind of has translated in that sense. I don't know when the last time you decked somebody was, but intellectually,
it's rare, actually. I understand what you're saying here. I basically agree with you, except I will qualify that because I actually actively seek not to have engagements, hostile engagements with other researchers or people. I actually try to avoid those. But it is true. Like when I look back on all of those years of childhood fights, which went into my mid-teens, okay, the last time of which I actually got kicked in the side of the head and I went flying like 10 feet. And I thought after this, someone's going to pull a knife and I got to figure out a different way to deal with the conflict. But all of that I think is good. I'm glad. I'm positively glad that I went through all of those experiences. When I look at, parents today, they're like, no aggression, no kids, no, like, I think it's actually really misguided. And I think it harms the kids because I believe you have to let kids work their stuff out. Yeah. You have to let them learn how to deal with the fact that not every other kid's going to like you. Yeah. And you're going to have to figure out, what do you do with that fact that not everyone in the world is going to like me? How do you deal with nasty people who say things to you? Like, these are things we have to figure out so that you don't become a brittle person when you get older, so that you actually learn. So you can't really learn conflict resolution unless you've had some conflict. Yeah. Like, I really believe that. You have to know what it's like to engage in conflict, like scary conflict. Now, people have gone to war and done battle. I've never done that. They've gone on a totally different level. Yeah. But when you're a kid and you have a fight, that's scary on that level. Like, so you have to learn what? You have to learn to be brave. You have to learn to stand up for yourself when it's needed. You have to learn also how to de-escalate. Yeah. Because for every fight that I had as a kid, I probably was de-escalating 3 or 4 times that number. Yeah. Because there were just aggressive kids in my neighborhood. Yeah. And so, you learn skills. And so I'm very grateful that I did learn those skills. And I'm also glad that I got out of it by the time things started getting really dangerous.
Yeah. I was saying here, your mother was a heavy metal fan?
My mother, my mother was never a heavy metal fan. My mother was an Engelbert Humperdinck, Tom Jones, Harry Belafonte, kind of
This is such a great
she was having some fun here with me.
Yes,
and
rabbit ears.
Typical mom, like just
it's
just goofing around. Great. I'm rocking the bell bottoms, by the way. Totally digging this.
Again, these photos speak for themselves. I just have enjoyed looking at them and looking at them again. you think you know somebody, and then you have a window into their childhood, and it just enriches the friendship and is an awful lot of fun. Again, I'm so glad you're sharing these pictures with all of us.
I was a happy kid, and I had a loving family. I was mentioning I had a lot of aggression. I didn't really complete that thought, but that's okay. But the physical aggression really became a kind of, you could say, almost weaponized intellectually, because I became this fanatical student, and I sort of overcame fears. I learned to overcome fear through aggression. I don't know if that's the best lesson I'll have to learn, but that's what I learned as a kid.
Well,
and I became aggressive, sometimes too aggressive physically, but always very mentally. And so that's just finishing that thought.
A lot of that energy got blown out in sports because you were very involved, not just in following a professional sports team, but being out there and playing.
So check this out. This is a police picnic. These are cops.
Oh, wow.
These are my dad's buddies, like his brothers in blue.
Yeah.
And they were like, let the kid play catcher. I'm showing very bad form there, just begging to get my fingers broken. But they were letting me play. I think I even got to hit in that game once.
That's intense in itself. I mean, my dad was a self-employed businessman most of his life with a very small wholesale jewelry company. And, the guys he dealt with were like Hasidic Jews and European, and a very different group of dad's friends here.
Listen, let me tell you, man, I grew up around these guys, many of them, my dad's partners especially, and you're talking New York City cops of the 70s, okay? Rock and roll time, man.
Whoa.
Long hair. My dad was a plainclothes officer in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Bed-Stuy, Mike Tyson's neighborhood when Tyson was growing up.
Yeah, for people that don't know, in the 70s especially, that was a very rough ghetto. And these cops these were wild guys. A lot of them, they were trash talkers, very tough people. Very many of them were nice guys, but they were rough. A picture of your dad in uniform, and you can look at that face. It's a beautiful, open, smiling face, but you can also see, I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of that guy.
You didn't want to. My dad was nicknamed Mad Dog as a cop. And what worked, as I said, in the 75, they made a movie about it recently, 75th Precinct in Brooklyn. And my dad was incredibly, I would say, fanatically active about getting the bad guys. He actually created a dossier that was independent of the department, that was superior, I think, to what the department had, with photographs, mugshots, criminal histories. And I mean, he was an incredibly active cop, but he didn't know how to play politics in his department. And my dad, loudmouth, get in the face of his boss, call him all kinds of this and that. And it was the biggest regret of his life that he never got his detective gold shield, which he truly, I think he warranted it. Yeah. He was certainly active enough to have gotten it, but you can't call your boss an a-hole over and over again and go after his son, who's also a cop, my dad, and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And he became, in his later years, he was actually quite bitter about, he loved his years in the force, and it broke his heart at the same time.
Yeah. While we're looking at this picture of your dad and remembering about how old you were at the time, the world of movies and films, how did that open up to you? On television, or did the family go out to the movies sometimes? What was that? How did that work?
A little bit of both. We did, the earliest movie I remember as a kid, I watched, I think it was Mary Poppins in the theater. I spent most of the time playing with my Pez dispenser, as I recall, thinking, wow, what a cool little thing this is. Sometimes paying attention to the movie, but I was 3 or 4 years old. But as I got older, a lot of TV, a lot of TV shows, and but TV movies. I would watch a lot of like westerns and war movies with my father. My dad was like, oh, Richie, let's watch some blood and guts. See if there's a good John Wayne picture.
Classic. Yeah,
that was my dad.
Did you have
John Wayne on TV?
Any favorite shows on your own, or favorite shows that the family watched together regularly?
Yeah, let's see. All in the Family. I remember when that was a big show.
Boy.
That was a huge show, and we watched that was a really important show culturally in this country. Watched it every week. Sanford and Son, huge fan of Red Fox.
Yeah.
I still play the theme song in my head to this day. And Dummy is still one of my favorite lines of all time. That's you know. I was a big fan of The Odd Couple was a huge favorite of mine.
Yeah,
The family watched a lot of those shows together. There was an era when families would do that sort of thing because there wasn't an internet and you couldn't record things either. So if you wanted to watch a show, like you had to all be there at the same time. And so you get that experience together, which we did and everyone else did, of course.
At this point in your life, though, you're coming well into adolescence. Are you now focusing on anything special that you might want to be as an adult, or has your reading choices changed? What are you starting to read on your own at this point? Is it still science and history? Getting into some fiction? Again, you have such a wide range of interests. I'm curious about when it started to really branch out more.
Thinking here. Well, fiction came a little later for me. I developed a real love for great literature in my mid-teens and later teens, and then in university. But as an early teen, I was reading 3 different types of books. I was reading a lot of science. I can't remember the specific science books. These were not ultra advanced. I would say these were age appropriate types of books for me, but there were many different science books that my dad built me a very large bookshelf at the time. So I had to accommodate something, bookcase. And so science, history, like for me, the history wasn't historical analysis. It was historical biographies of like famous people in the past. I remember that, like Christopher Columbus and Abraham Lincoln and, you know, other famous people in history. I had a lot of historical biographies. Thomas Edison, I remember that one now. And quite many others that I forgotten. I had a lot of young people's encyclopedia sets that I actually read all the time, illustrated and things like that. Wow. And then the third subject was sports, and primarily baseball. I had a lot of baseball books when I was a kid growing up. And the one thing that I got out of baseball that I've kept with me my whole life was a love for numbers. I became really into baseball statistics, like seriously into. So I had a massive baseball card collection. I'd look at the stats, and really became very conversant. And I used to get these baseball statistical games. I'm sure some people watching this know what I'm talking about. There was one called Stratomatic in the early 70s, and I had that. And so, like, what you're doing is you're getting these classic baseball teams of the past, the 1927 Yankees or the 41 Dodgers or whatever. And you could play them against each other because you had the stats. And so, and I knew baseball statistics by heart, like which player had how many home runs in what year. And like my mind, I had all of that. And parents, friends, some of them who went to baseball, they'd look at me like, what is with this kid? Like,
well, I also love that it's taking you into the realm of history, even deeper. With this as the widget that's bringing you into it. But
exactly, baseball
that love of the past and things, and I can hardly believe it. But I think we're coming in toward the end of our first hour. I'm looking for a sign from our illustrious producer, whether or not that's so, because I want to begin the second hour with you reminiscing a bit about one of my favorite of your favorite relatives. And
you must not miss the Aunt Lorraine stories.
Yeah. With that understood, this is Peter Robbins on Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting with my special guest tonight, Richard Dolan, and we will be back in a matter of minutes. Bye for now.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. you'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Are you still at it?
Yeah, I need more speed.
This baby's fast.
My dad's fast. He's scary fast.
You really think you could beat him?
Yeah, because I drink more tea than he does.
Yeah, right.
You know, pal, it's the tea that makes you go. Oh. Hey, Dad.
You know, kiddo, you have to drink a lot more tea to be faster than me.
Drink the tea that makes you go. Life Change Tea. You may not need as much as Dad. You never know. GetTheTea.com. Log on to GetTheTea.com.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
And welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with Peter Robbins and my special guest for the evening, Richard M. Dolan, M standing for Michael, in case you did not know that earlier. Yes.
That's right.
We
Yeah,
had that
right.
breakthrough at the beginning of the show. We are cutting edge, always.
No one ever knew that fact before, ever.
Well, it's, people have died defending that particular secret. M could have stood for murder. Who knows?
That's right.
I had wanted to open this segment with reminiscences about an aunt of yours. Again, I think one of the things that makes the most effective individuals in almost any field of endeavor, whatever their specialty is they know how to communicate in a manner that is both effective and educates, but understand that if you're too dry, it won't hold. And they're just naturally entertaining in the way that they communicate facts. I think it's one of the things that makes you the great communicator that you are. You're a great storyteller. And I'm talking about true stories, but your Aunt Lorraine was a piece of work, if you don't mind my saying.
Totally. That's
Here
one
she
thing.
is. Would you please introduce us to this extraordinary woman?
Oh my God, I love seeing this. So Lorraine was one of my dad's sisters. So it was my father's side of the family. My dad was the youngest of a bunch of kids. Again, he had a different father than the rest of them, but they had the same mother. Yeah. So look at Lorraine's cigarette. Every time you see her, there's a cigarette in her hand. And this one I love because it's over a birthday cake, and she doesn't give. So Aunt Lorraine. Okay, so when I was a little kid, I didn't know what a lesbian was. I didn't understand that whole concept. Like, women having sex. I didn't even know what sex was, let alone people having sex with the same sex. I didn't understand any of that stuff. So I never really, I always noticed that Lorraine was a little more rough than every other woman that I'd ever known.
Different than other women, yes.
Had this raspy voice that was just like this. This is exactly how she talked. I'm not kidding. And of course, with the smoke. And then she would go into these coughing jacks. She'd be like, Jesus Christ. with expletives in there left and right. But the other thing you notice about Lorraine is that smile of hers.
Yeah.
Right? She's got this beaming smile.
Yeah.
So she was this happy, like, at least around me, she was always this happy person. But yeah, she was gay, and I didn't understand what lesbians were. And she'd wear these rugged jeans all the time, and like a lot of times she'd have like these work shirts on, and you just learn to accept this. Like, oh well, that's just Aunt Lorraine. Who knows? I didn't understand this whole thing. But she was, and look at this one. I didn't want to crop this picture. It's one of those classic, like poorly framed pictures of the early 70s. It's just like, let's throw it out the way it is. But again, cigarette in her hand.
Oh yeah.
And again, check out that smile and the bud. She's got a can of bud.
I was going to say, yeah, there's a beer.
Yeah, perfect. That's like absolutely clear. There's one other that when you get to show it, it's another good one that I think. But they're all the same. Like, they're all the same picture. So Lorraine, let me just tell you a couple of cool things about her. So she, she was drinking and smoking at a young age in Brooklyn, where they all lived. And she once told me a story about going into a bar. Now, she had to be probably 15 years old. All right. And she's going into this bar. And this is right before the outbreak of World War II. And, what people often don't remember is that before the fighting started on America's side anyway, there were a lot of Americans who were not just sympathetic to the German side of it, but were actually, they were into the Nazi party.
That's right.
Not neo-Nazi. All right. Nazi party.
Regular.
Because we were not at war with Hitler, and it was just, so there were American Nazis. So Lorraine, and it was called the Bund, the B-U-N-D, the Bund, was the league, the German American League. So she goes into this bar, and she says to me, and by the way, when you're in New York, she says this, and I says to her, and I says to her, and so now I'm getting into that mode. So Lorraine says to me, she says, yeah, so I go into this bar, and I see I got to watch my language here. These guys are in the Bund.
Yes and no.
These Nazis. Well, she was going to call them a-holes, and she, but she wouldn't say a. They're doing the Nazi thing. And so this is 15-year-old girl, keep in mind, okay? She says, yeah, so I says to them, hey, this is America. We believe in freedom here, whatever else she said, You don't like it, go to Germany. Things like that. She said, yeah, the next thing that happened is they threw me out on the sidewalk right on my ass. But that's her story. And hey, man, teenage girl going up to these Nazi Americans and speaking her mind, and then telling me all these years later. I love it. A cool story. I have a cousin named Janine, who on that side of the family, who's hilarious, like one of the best sense of humor. And she actually knows Lorraine even the best. She's got all the Lorraine stories. One time, like, she was talking about how Lorraine was trying to, Lorraine just did all of her own stuff. This is her in our backyard.
That's a serious ashtray ready to.
She's like, yeah. How do you not love that woman? But she once tried to lay her own concrete patio. So she's mixing her own concrete, and I think she just did a really terrible job of it. Like,
oh dear.
She wasn't really technically. So Janine was just, I remember telling me the story about how awful Lorraine's concrete patio was. And I wish I could remember all those details. Lorraine wasn't a cook. Her idea about spaghetti literally was spaghetti with ketchup, and that was a perfectly fine meal. Don't get fancy. If you were fancy, you were a princess.
Yes.
You were fancy, you were a princess. If you were a woman that wore a skirt, God forbid, what are you, a princess? You a princess? This was like her thing with any like remotely feminine activity by a woman. Was that was a princess, and Lorraine like dished that out all the time. My favorite Lorraine story is one that I have told you, and
I've asked you to retell.
One of the last times that I was with Lorraine, and this is right after around the time I got married with Karen. So we're talking like early 90s, maybe 1991 even. So we're in Brooklyn visiting my dad and his sister Shirley, who's the other sister that was alive, and then Lorraine was there at Shirley's place. I love my Aunt Shirley, by the way. So she, and then it was me and Karen, and my sister Nancy was also there. So it's the six of us, and my dad. So 6 of us. My dad has 2 sisters, me, Karen, and Nancy. So we have a nice meal. Shirley prepares it all, and we're cleaning up after. But most of us are just sitting around the table. Like Shirley's doing all the work, unfortunately, and she's like 10 feet away in the kitchen, and we're talking about tea now. So this is the conversation. So Karen and Nancy, so my sister and my wife are, they're like in their 20s. They're young. And they're having this conversation about different kinds of tea that they like. Now, keep in mind, like Lorraine's a coffee and beer. That's Lorraine. And if she ever did tea, which I don't think she did, it would be black tea. That's it. Nothing fancy. See? So here's Karen and Nancy talking about, I love hibiscus tea. Oh, yes, hibiscus is very nice. And chamomile, very delicious. And have you tried rosehip tea? Oh, I think I tried rosehip. When they're going back and forth about this, right? So here's the thing about Lorraine. Lorraine would look at you. She did this to me a lot when I was a kid. I noticed, like, she'd cock her head a little bit and squint one eye and twist her mouth a little bit. She'd like this. And she'd be looking at you. She did this to me like, interesting kid. Maybe he'll be something when he gets older. It's a little weird, but like this is her thing. She did head cock. So I always recognize it. So these 2 young ladies, my sister and my wife, are talking about different teas, like rosehip teas and things like this. Lorraine cocks her head, gives the squint, cocks the mouth, and I'm just waiting. Like I'm waiting for the next thing. No, because like I know it's going to be something crazy. So this is Lorraine. She yells. She doesn't talk. She yells to Shirley, who's literally probably 5 feet away from her at the sink, because it's a small apartment.
Yeah.
This is Lorraine. Cheryl, get a load of this. Flowers in the fucking tea.
This is what memories are made of. This is as good as it gets.
That's right. Flowers in the bleeping tea.
Well,
and of course, everyone just started laughing. My dad, Karen, and Nancy, we all just started laughing hilariously. You're like, how do you not? That's just perfect. Lorraine, though, just the thing I love about her. I miss her. Yeah. She died in the 90s, and she had a heart of gold, man. She had a heart of gold. I miss her, just total down to earth, straightforward. Both sides of my family. This is the thing I love about them. Maybe I don't know if this is a New York thing specifically.
I like it is,
but they tell it like it is. They're not mean. A lot of people think New Yorkers are mean. Not really true. But a classic New Yorker, from my perspective, is someone who is very upfront and forthright. I mean, almost to the point where they're not self-conscious about it. Like Lorraine was not self-conscious about a thing. She was just who she was. Yeah. And that's something that, like, I really, I appreciate that about her and about many of my other, on my mom's side too. They were exactly the same way. They were just very upfront about their feelings, their emotions. If they were upset about something, they would tell you. They wouldn't hold, well, they might hold grudges, but not really. I often found that we were able to let things go and you just move on. But you do express yourself. And honestly, like, I think what a healthy, beautiful thing that is on both sides of my family.
Absolutely.
I'm just so grateful.
You think about so many people, again, the impressions that are made on us as children, and whether or not you can have equally well-meaning families, but very different styles. And if one family is very proper in the sense of, we're not going to say anything about X, Y, and Z around the children. If we do, it'll be filtered through language that's appropriate, as opposed to that wonder of, wow, I just heard a grown-up say a curse word. That's so cool, and they knew I was here. I guess I'm getting, more respect in the grown, stuff like that. That's so much fun for us as kids. I remember my sisters and my cousins and I, when the family would get together, and a very equally energetic, raucous, behavior-wise like yours, except Russian Jewish emigres family.
You have a cool family. I've learned a lot about them, and I agree.
And after, the meal, which of course was the centerpiece, they weren't drinkers at all. They would drink club soda and diet soda and
Much
seltzer
singer.
water. And they'd set up card tables, and they'd either play gin rummy or that was the big one. I forget what the other one is, and we'd sit under the tables, and they knew we were there. But every once in a while, if it was a bad hand for somebody, a word would slip out, and we would look at each other in glee that they said one of those words. This is so cool.
I know. So funny when kids, get into it. It was very similar with my childhood. Oh, there's a picture of me.
Another happy kid picture.
Probably about 12 years old, starting to get some long hair. It's probably 1974.
Yeah,
I like this, a happy face.
It is. It's a great shot of you.
Yeah.
Now, this is moving along a bit.
I love this. So these are my two cousins, Michael on the left and David on the right. Michael's the taller one. They were brothers, and they were like my brothers. And to this day, I love both of them so much. Yeah. So they were the sons of my Aunt Joan, who was my mom's, one of my mom's sisters.
Yeah.
We all kind of grew up together. Yeah. And you can see I don't look too upset over the fact that
they're strangling you. Yeah.
We were a lot of roughhousing, especially with David, because you wouldn't know from that picture, but David and I were only 1 year apart. David and Michael were both giants. And I was a normal sized kid, but David was big. But we would wrestle. We would have these epic smackdowns with each other in our early teen years, and we were both like totally into it, and we just love to roughhouse and do all this kind of play fighting, and
that's the word.
Also play baseball but I love them both.
This is another winner here. Jeez.
This is my neighborhood. This is neighborhood kids. Yeah, I like this because there's me. I got the sweatshirt number 25 in the back there. I can't see the resolution on my screen is a little bright, and I can't tell you who everyone else there is, but these are the kids I grew up with, and
great.
We were just all like one very big neighborhood community. I used to round up all the kids for local baseball games. I know you want to come out for a game. Someone had to do, and that was me. But we all and the girls were into gymnastics back then. One of the girls was like really into it. She had a balance beam on the front yard, and like my sister would go over there and just like do their cartwheels and their flips and all that stuff. And like everyone was just out getting into life and just having a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's
and having fights too, but also playing.
I think we romanticize the best of our childhoods in our own minds and compare it again. So, these kids now stuck in front of their computers and, less and less actually hands-on.
Right.
To a great degree, it really is that way, that we were out playing and actively, being with each other and making up games and, out in nature a good point of the time, competing in a happy, healthy way. This kind of ups the ante in terms of time. And it also locates a certain moment in, are we talking about the later 70s here?
We are in 1977. I'm 15, wearing the same sweatshirt that we saw in the other picture. So it looks like I needed to retire that thing because I'm clearly older.
Wow.
Yeah, and with my slick back hair. So this picture is great because, boy, there's a lot of those people that are not alive. Some of them died young.
Yeah.
My sister Lisa is in the foreground on the left of that picture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And boy, I know everyone in this picture. So look at these tough dudes, like open shirt. This was how everyone was, you know, and actually one of the people in this picture, I won't mention who, committed suicide not long after this, a teen suicide, a tough kid, was a scary kid. There was a tight element to our neighborhood, and some of the people in this picture, I truly can say I love them. And some turned out really well, had good lives. Some had really rough lives. Yeah. Really rough lives.
Richard, at this point, you know, your social life is starting to happen. The world of girls, the world of, you know, movies and popular culture. What kind of music were you listening to at this point? Favorite bands or the type of music that you gravitated toward?
Well, first thing I'm going to say is look at that picture of me at that age, and you can tell that I had no girlfriends. Like there were no girls who would be interested in that kid.
One can dream.
Well, I did, you know, but it was a fruitless dream.
Hey, Richard, I'm going to jump in here real quick, you guys. Is that the same sweatshirt that you had on in the picture before?
Yeah, yes. Clearly needed to retire that bad boy.
Hey, I just wanted to say that's a hallmark of a true man right there. If you got a comfortable shirt that looks good and feels good, you'll wear that thing till it falls completely apart.
I was starting to outgrow it, I think. That's what it looked like. Yeah, I vaguely remember it too, actually. I'm glad to see it there.
But yeah,
but like girls, no, I had a very major crush on one neighborhood girl who is not in that picture I see, but she was someone that I think everyone had a crush on her, and you know, I had no chances. I had no chances with any girls, honestly, all through high school. It was a great desert for me in that whole department. And in terms of music, so I was into a lot of like interesting music. Oh God almighty, man.
What had you been awarded there?
That might have been National Honor Society, some high school thing. I'm a little older here, so check out my hair.
Yeah.
But mainly check out the hair of the dude in the back there. He is rocking the world, like classic fro. And the girl whose back is to the camera is also like classic long hair. I just love that picture just for the fashion alone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was getting some award in probably close to my senior year. And I'm rocking that mustache, a little bit of the teenage.
Yeah. Totally.
But in terms of music, so I was into I was big, huge Beatles fan in my early teens. Beatles were done by then, but I love the Beatles. Elton John. I went through Elton John stuff. And then when I was in my mid-teens, I got serious. So I got into like Zeppelin and like more like classic rock.
Yeah.
That was big. Led Zeppelin became very big for me. And a lot of the rock bands, Queen, I liked them. And then by the time of that last picture that you were showing in my high school, I got into punk rock. So you would know it from my hairstyle there, but I was just about to really go into the punk movement, meaning the Clash, the Sex Pistols, all of those guys. I really got into that scene for a couple of years.
At this point in your life, you are moving through high school. Are you now thinking about something that maybe this is something I can do, that I'd want to study? And also, when we first met, one of the first visits that I made to your house almost 20 years ago, I remember being down in your office study, and I noticed, with no special attention to it, it was a small frame print of a scene from ancient Greece. And I gave it no real thought, not being aware that at some point in your life, because of your intellect, your curiosity, your fascination with the realities of history, you had immersed yourself in writings from and about ancient Greece. You had read the philosophers, you had read the great dramas, you had read some of the historians, and while you had never been to Greece, this lived in your head.
Yes.
Was this coincident with this period of time, or did that come later?
That was just later.
Interesting.
I developed a real love of Greek history when I was in university. So by this time, though,
This
And
picture.
this is when I'm going off
This
to
is
my
a
first
classic.
day at university.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my dad. Look at that.
Wow.
That picture says
Proud.
everything to me.
Proud of you. You are going to be the first Dolan to go to university. This is major.
Look at my dad's face. He's got that confidence. He's like proud of my boy. And you can see that insecurity in my face. Like, I'm not sure what is this going to be like. I was definitely nervous. I couldn't even eat my eggs for breakfast that morning. My stomach was just, so I was so nervous.
Yeah.
By the time that I went to university, my last few years in high school, I was convinced that I was going to be a political science major. So I'd gotten into political theory and political studies to a large extent. A lot of that was actually influenced by my father, actually, who was a real, back in those days, a real libertarian. You know, that's a word now, but back even in the 70s, my dad was, he introduced me to some actually still very excellent libertarian philosophy that I appreciate to this day. And so I went in thinking I'm going to do poli-sci, and I got bored with poli-sci after my first semester, and I fell in love in my first semester in college with literature, English literature, and the second semester with academic history, like serious history as it's studied in universities at that time. So I just realized I had two fantastic professors in English lit and in history, and that had a lot to do with it. But they really triggered it was an almost love at first sight for me when I was introduced to these disciplines in Alfred University in upstate New York State, a really wonderful school for me at that time. I had a professor in history named Stuart L. Campbell, who I love to this day, and a great English lit professor named David O'Hara, not Irish, but Japanese, Hawaiian, Japanese, David O'Hara. Dr. David, I loved both of those men. Were big mentors of me. And I worked really hard for them. I looked up to them both so much and learned. And there were other great professors in those departments. They weren't the only ones. My brain was on fire in university, even unlike high school. Like, I was a very good high school student, but when I went to the university, something flipped with me. I was away from home for the first time. I was able to really almost like recreate who I was for the first time. You know, when you go through junior high and high school, like everyone knows who you are. You can't be someone different. I went to this university, and I thought, I don't have to be that old kid. I can be someone new. And I remembered trying to lose my Long Island accent. Good luck with that. But more seriously, I thought I'm going to figure out how to get an actual girlfriend. Like, that was a big thing on my mind. And I'm going to throw myself into this fascinating world of intellectual exploration. Oh, this is it's an awesome picture. No glasses yet. I was a radio disc jockey.
I love it.
Radio station. And I had a girlfriend who took that picture. We were very serious at the time, actually. And she was a wonderful person. And I had a morning radio program. Actually, I ended up doing a classical music show. So I started out doing punk rock for the first year. And then I got into classical music for the first time in my life through the library of my university. They had all these LP records. And that was a crazy thing. I saw Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. I think that's what it was that actually tripped me up.
Oh, interesting.
He has that whole Beethoven second movement of the Ninth Symphony that's just out of control. It's amazing.
What a way to get interested in classical music.
This sadistic movie, brilliant movie. But anyway, I got into classical music. And then so for the last 3 years of my university, because I was a DJ for 4 years, and I did classical music, actually. And so that was a picture. I like that picture. I was this young kid. I think I was probably 20 years old in that photograph.
Everything to follow. This is where it all really moves up a level. You included the next picture, which I was so thankful for, because for those of us that were fortunate enough to go to university or college, and you get caught up in the world of learning as opposed to housekeeping, this is, especially for guys, well, not even. This tells the tale wonderfully well. So thank you again for including this wonderful shot.
Of course, yeah. It's an embarrassing picture on one level.
It's the best.
So this is from my first year in graduate school. This is now spring of 1985.
Yeah.
And I'm at the University of Rochester at this point. That's my room when I first moved into the first campus housing that I had. And by the way, if you look at, there's a clock in there and it's late. So
I think that's the same alarm clock I have. That's 25 after 11.
Isn't that funny? Yeah. So at some point I had to clear that bed off and get to sleep, but look at all the crap there. But some of those books I recognize and have to this day.
Yeah.
On my shelves. All of them I think I remember, but some of them I still have. Well, and it was a messy room. That was like the life I lived.
Well, messy room, wonderfully preoccupied.
No girlfriends
mind.
in that room, that's for sure.
The next photo for me is the beginning of the Richard M. Dolan, who I recognize.
Yes.
And it's like, welcome. It has taken you this journey. Mm-hmm. This is the person that is emerging as the adult that so many of us now are aware of. It's a great shot. Right.
Yeah, I like that picture. That was actually taken by a friend of mine who died of AIDS, actually, some years later. I took an equally cool picture of him. That's in front of my apartment in Rochester. And I was about 25 years old there. So it's late 80s by then. And we were actually going out for like a lunch. He was in the history department. We were both graduate students. He was a brilliant guy, a super brilliant guy. Tragically died. But we had probably 500 cups of coffee together in our friendship over time. And, we were just going out on this occasion, and we just decided to take pictures of where we were at that point in our life.
Yeah. It's actually a great way to measure a friendship. 500 cups of coffee. That says something about something. This is great. Hello, Rochester.
This is Berlin, of course. And this is November 1989. This is right after the wall was breached, and this part of the wall was not breached. So I was deep into grad studies at this time, and back then I was doing German history, and that's what got me to Berlin. This was a trip that I had planned many months before the wall was opened in November 9th, 1989. So I had been planning this for some time. I actually predicted the opening of the wall several months before it happened, 3 months before. That's a whole other story I won't get into, but I saw the whole thing happening. Not psychically, but politically. I just knew it was, once Hungary opened their borders to the West, it was like, okay, it's game over. That wall's not going to last the year. And the only question for me was, will I get there before or after? And what I didn't realize, I wasn't thinking it through, is the significance of the date, November 9th. That's a very important date in German history, and that's when it happened. But anyway, this is probably November 13th or 14th. And look, I'm a happy 27-year-old young guy at the wall, feeling very confident and rocking some leather jacket there with white sneakers. It was the style of the times.
You are very American looking. And
very happy.
It was
an electric time, Berlin period. Like you would see people who didn't know each other embracing and talking and laughing and crying.
Yeah, yeah. It occurred to me looking at this picture, thinking about a young man who grew up with some sense of history, got more and more intrigued by it, decided at a certain point, my life is going to be about history, and, a historian in some level, or studying it, becoming a scholar. And here you are, legitimately for the first time in your life, intersecting physically and at extraordinary time and location where history is actually being made. You can feel the wind of history in your face.
I guess
You're part of it.
Good way to put it. Good way to put it. Yeah, it's true. I was there for 3 months during that period, doing what I then thought was going to be a dissertation in German history. My German was never good enough. That was my fundamental problem. My German language skills were at their best, they had become fair. but really never good enough for what I was trying to do. And that was my biggest limitation.
Let me ask you a question relevant to how the great majority of people come to have you as a presence in their life. Up until this moment in your life, what thoughts had you had, if any, about this so-called phenomena of unidentified flying objects?
Yeah, almost none. I say almost, not fully none, because I grew up with the TV show In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, and I was vaguely familiar with Chariots of the Gods and Von Daniken. But it wasn't, I have to say, like, it wasn't a subject that I ever got into. Never. All through my childhood, all through my university, all through even for several years after that photograph. I didn't get actually, there was one brief exception. I remembered seeing Whitley Strieber's Communion in a bookstore in
87, that would have been.
Yeah, but I saw it later, probably maybe around 1990, probably sometime around, maybe even later than that, maybe 91, 92, actually.
Yeah.
But I remember when I saw it, it's the cover, of course, that gets everyone. And it was a shocking cover to me. I almost felt like I can't be reading this. It was like, you can't look at this. Like, it was almost that, like, no one must see you read a book about aliens and UFOs. And I did actually buy it. Yeah, I bought it, but it was a while before I read it. And until I didn't read it until after I really got into Tim Good's book, Above Top Secret, a couple of years later. Then I went back and I delved into Whitley's book.
Well, we're coming into that. Your life shortly thereafter changes really in as dramatic and as real a way as it can as a young adult. You are now married. And
that's right.
Karen. You and Karen are the father of 2 children.
That's right.
Living in
Rochester. We've moved ahead a few years now.
Yeah. And how are you making your living now?
Yeah, so it wasn't through UFO books, of course. Although this photograph now, because I really did jump ahead here, this is around the time that I was becoming known, just becoming known in the UFO field.
Yeah.
This is probably around 2000 when my first book came out. But what I was doing to make a living is, I wasn't able, I left the academic world in the early 90s. Excuse me. And I left it because I became obsessed with UFOs. That was a big part of it. And the other part, it was just, I wasn't confident about a career in that field any longer. And I was always very good at what I did, but I didn't really know if this was going to work for me. And at that same time, I became obsessed with UFOs in 94. And so, but that couldn't make my living. And I couldn't bring myself to work for a company. I didn't know how to do that, like go work for Zero, go work for Kodak here in Rochester. And I just couldn't do it. Like, there was always something inside me that said, you must not do this. You must, you can't really. It was like this imperative.
Yeah.
You must remain true to your mind. And it was this overwhelming thing, but I didn't know how to do it. So I ended up running my own little business for 20 years as a writer of professional resumes for job seekers. And I was quite good at that. I will just say, I became, certainly, I believe, the best in this region of the country. People learned about me from all over the U.S., actually. I had people who called me up from, on recommendations, Silicon executives and people in the Southeast and people all over, but mostly in Rochester area, Monroe County, where I live. And I probably did resumes for roughly, I estimate, close to 10,000 different individuals over the course of 20 years. And they would come to my office, sit down one-on-one, just one-on-one. And I would pick their brain. I would ask them, I had a very efficient methodology, and I would sit down, tell me about your career, tell me about your life, tell me about your accomplishments, tell me what you want to do with yourself. And I had a good way of drawing. I developed a good method of drawing things out of people. During that time, by the way, is when I started researching UFOs, and I developed a pretty massive UFO library. And after enough time had gone by, people would see my UFO books as I'm getting into their career, and some people would end up telling me their UFO encounters, and I ended up getting several hundred.
Classic. Oh my
that
God.
way. People saying, "Oh, let me just tell you this or tell you that."
Right.
It was kind of an amazing thing.
Flashing back again, at a certain point, when you're immersed in excelling as a student, you become not just interested, but deeply interested in ancient Greece, its philosophy, its theater, its everything.
Absolutely.
And when we had, it was for me kind of a minor epiphany, because I love Greece. The first time I traveled there, I was in my early 20s and just settled into Athens for a month and immersed myself in Greek culture.
Wow, yeah, I'm envious of that.
Yeah, I had been back again to speak at a conference some years before we were invited to by our dear friend Jenny Sari, the
Jenny's
Greek,
wonderful
ufologist, for a very special pair of conferences called Contact with Space, based on the title of Wilhelm Reich's last book. They were UFO and primarily orgonomic Reich conferences. But I remember that feeling of, you know so much about this culture. I've been immersed in it in several trips, but I know so relatively little. And it opened up another area of kind of mutual passion for both of us.
Oh.
But what was it? What was it that impelled you to learn about the Greeks?
Maybe philosophy first. When I was an undergraduate at Alfred University, I had two majors. English Lit and History were my two. I have a bachelor's in both of them.
Okay.
And for one semester, I was a declared triple major. I actually was a declared. It's insane. And that third major was philosophy. Now I ended up not getting a bachelor's in philosophy. But I did get a minor concentration in it. So I actually studied quite a bit of academic philosophy as an undergraduate. And you always have to deal with the Greeks. They were the creators of so many of the critical philosophical concepts that we have. I mean, the very word idea is a Greek word. The word philosophy is a Greek word. And so I think, yes, absolutely. I remembered studying the pre-Socratic philosophers and Plato and Aristotle. I read all of them. And then from that, through my lit program, I remember reading the Greek tragedians. My favorite of those, the three that really come down that you study and use, that one used to study when we used to study classical things, would be Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, in that order. Aeschylus was always my favorite. He's the earliest, and he remains my favorite. I just reread just in the last month a modern contemporary translation, a verse translation of the Oresteia trilogy by Aeschylus, and it is just absolute powerful genius. I can't even begin. Profound, deep level genius writing, and the translation was beautiful. So yes, it's just like a love, a real serious love that I have for. It's funny. Everyone talks about diversity in culture today, but like for me, history is the ultimate teacher of diversity. You go into these cultures that are nothing like our own, where people, the very grammar of their thinking, the way that they structure their thoughts is fundamentally, in many key ways, different from how we structure our own thoughts. And for me, like, it's this fascinating adventure to explore how do these people, these geniuses of the past, how do they actually think? And that's just like a fun thing. And you can kind of get into that by just studying the grammar and the mode of expression. Another one to do that with is Homer's Iliad. The Odyssey too, but I'm a fan of the Iliad a little bit more. And the stark beauty of the language is so amazing.
It was one of the things that made the two visits that we've taken to Greece together so much different than my first two visits there on my own, because first the first visit there, when it was your very first visit and it was my third, the novelty of watching your brain explode in very happy ways as
my God, it was so awesome.
Walked on the paths, we followed in the footsteps. The first, it was my third, but your first walking up to
the Acropolis.
one of the most extraordinarily famous locations in the
Parthenon.
world. And you think about who has walked that route.
I get chilled even now thinking about that memory.
I was going to say, for
remember it
me,
so well.
this is the reality of time travel for me. Being able to, like a child, disassociate from the hard realities of the adult world at the moment and just be there in that space that 5,000, 4,000, 3,000 years ago, or whatever. And at some point, perhaps together, we can take viewers on a brief travelogue around Greece. It's not going to be now. And of course, our time is flying and we're moving into...
Yeah, we should go. I don't know how much time we have left. This is a man named Val Gurman. Val, not a lot of people know Val. This is after my first book was published. So we're probably in 2001, I want to say. So Val, along with Tim Good's Above Top Secret, that book was I've talked about that influence many, many times. But Val is someone, he never published a book in ufology, but in the 1990s was writing really amazing articles on ufology and really looking at the big picture, the political implications of ufology, and trying to come away with mainstreaming it, at least as I interpret it. And so he was actually a really important influence for me in the mid 90s when I was really throwing myself. This is on the internet groups before there was even a web. There were the news groups called Usenet, and there was a alt.paranet.ufos where there was a lot of writing at the time. And Val, to me, was the dominant intellectual voice, and we became friends. And he taught me the value of constructing a UFO chronology. And that was one of the most important things. Like I have a absolutely massive chronology of UFO data. And it's all a chronological database of all the different sources that I've acquired over the years. But I learned that technique from Val. And anyway, so he was visiting Rochester one time, and he absolutely made a point to visit me, and I'm glad to have that picture. And I hope if Val sees this, I want to give him a shout out because he was an amazing guy. And there's Tim Good. This is in 2002 in Rochester at the MUFON Symposium where you and I met, Peter.
This is where we met, and Tim had been one of my major mentors and certainly had a tremendous influence on you and your work that you were beginning as well.
Yeah, Tim and I became friends starting from there, and I really appreciate his contribution to ufology is absolutely at the very top level. He's the writer of some of the very best books, and he wrote quite a few of them, not just Above Top Secret, but Beyond Top Secret, and Earth and Alien Enterprise. His last book is actually just absolutely amazing, and quite a few others. Ingo Swann, the great remote viewer. So Ingo, this is 2002 in I think northern New Jersey. Ingo did a lecture in Bordentown, New Jersey, and I was there for that. I didn't lecture, but somehow I went in. I can't remember why. Anyway, I went to meet Ingo and Bob Durant, who some people might remember. Bob passed away. Bob was a great guy, and he was good friends with Ingo. And somehow they knew who I was. First thing when they met me, they're like, "Oh my God, you're like a child. You're a little kid. I thought you were this older person." But Ingo gave a lecture, and I spent the evening at his home.
Wow!
And in Lower Manhattan. And we had a great conversation, and actually, we had a great conversation. I'll say
for those who don't know who Ingo Swann is.
He was the remote viewer who coined the phrase remote viewing. So remote viewing, think of psychic spies that the CIA and the military used to check up on the Russians and all of that. So that's everyone knows remote viewing at this point. And Ingo was really the first great remote viewer who went through he helped develop the protocols with Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ over at Stanford Research Institute in the early 70s and became a legend. Rightly so. And so by this point, Ingo was, he was out of that whole thing, but he was teaching remote viewing and occasionally giving lectures, and that is how we met.
And a familiar face here.
The wonderful Linda Moulton Howe. This is 2003, I believe. So again, almost 20 years ago, this is, I think, the first time I met Linda, but we got off on a good foot, and we've mostly stayed there ever since. You don't want to get on Linda's bad side. I'll just say that. Don't cross that woman ever. She is a lion, and I love her dearly.
Yeah.
And she is an inspiration. There's Jim Mars.
Yes.
Boy, there's a guy that I miss. Jim.
Another shining star in our firmament, and
I'll tell you,
great
man.
journalist, somebody who had a tremendous influence on me before I became involved in UFO studies with his classic study of the Kennedy assassination. And we met at a private talk put together by a wealthy society person in their apartment on Fifth Avenue. And I was one of the invited guests. And I remember walking in, and there he is. And I happened to be wearing a leather jacket and a hat similar to his. And we were almost the exact same height. And it was friendship at first sight. Jim was one of the greatest storytellers of all time, a brilliant journalist, a Texan in the best sense of the word, and somebody you really didn't want to be on the wrong side of or move too close to his property without permission, because he would shoot you.
Well, I never had that pleasure of being shot at on the property. I guess that would have been a cool thing. But we had a number of beers. I felt lucky because Jim and Linda were always tight friends. Yeah. And I would get to hang out with them. Like, I felt like I was the lucky kid to be with these two people that I considered legends. And they treated me like one of them. Like, the three of us. Yeah. I will just say, like, there were frequently, many times we'd get together at these conferences, and it wasn't just Jim and Linda, it was Jim, Linda, and me. And I got to be part of that, on terms that almost equal terms. They had a longer history. They were tighter friends, but I was good with both of them, and they respected me, and I was part of that amazing group. Jim was a real inspiration to me in a lot of ways. Like, I think he saw that I was like him in the sense of, like, he was a journalist who got into UFOs.
That's right.
So he did what we can call conspiracy theories, not in a pejorative way, but he did real ones and got into UFOs. And I was a UFO guy who got into his things.
Yes.
And so he saw that there was this very important overlap that I had that was actually almost unique. Like, there's not a lot of other people out there who do both of those worlds, like the UFO world and the broader covert operations world that Jim did, but I also do. And so I think he recognized in me that we were alike in a lot of ways. And so, and we just got along very well. And I was very lucky to be friends with him.
Also, if you reach I think it must be the same in any level of expertise or discipline or subculture in terms of classic studies. If you reach a certain level and you simply become a prima donna or begin to think about yourself as a legend in your own mind, as opposed to being a worker, remembering when you weren't known, when you were struggling, and you see somebody that has talent, that's working hard, that deserves a place at the table, and you simply extend them a hand and treat them as though they're an old friend, it can change your life. I remember that exact thing years and years ago with people like Tim Good or Stanton Friedman, Bud, of course, and so on down the pantheon. It's the right way to be. And another dear friend of ours here,
Sam and Julie Maranto.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually, I talk with Sam these days still. I'm going to do a thing for his Illinois MUFON group actually this coming weekend. Believe it or
good.
Not, from when we're doing this. These are two wonderful people.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. Sam's been very engaged in UFO research for many years.
Yeah.
He was actually the main investigator of the extremely important Tinley Park UFO sightings of 2004. But Sam's done a lot of other research and investigation. He's really knowledgeable. And Julie is such an awesome person.
Wonderful couple. And I spoke to him earlier this week as well. Now, I love that you included this one because it's a generic panel discussion. And
generic, totally.
You know, you and I are not on fire here. And even better, this one.
I know. I love that last picture. Like you're looking up, probably bored out of your mind. And I think I've got the same.
So
panel discussions are like real hit and miss for people who may have seen them, but to experience them is different. And like there are people who are really good on panels, and then there's the people who just hot dog it, don't give up the mic, or just boring AF. And you're just like, will you stop talking, please, and give it a rest.
And that somebody captured us at this fully engaging moment when
and I'm not accusing those other two people. I can't
no.
So.
It's actually great. And I thought, again, to kind of mark our long friendship, I would surprise you. I love also that you included this one, the seriousness of UFO studies personified right there.
With you there.
But this is a lovely picture that you sent and included, and I had forgotten about it. I thought,
this is Tracy, the love of my life, and we are in Greece.
Yeah,
Tracy's an expert group selfie picture taker. She's the best.
Yes, I'll say.
She's very good at it.
This one is.
I actually can't see that very well because of my screen. Oh, the baseball picture. Yes.
Yeah.
I did a lot of vintage baseball. This is vintage, old-time 1850s baseball. And I did this for about 10 years of my life.
Cool.
This is while I'm a UFO guy. This is while I'm in the UFO field in Rochester. We have just outside, there's a place called the Genesee Country Museum, a beautiful historical village. That really, they take it seriously. And one thing that they did eventually is they decided to create a vintage baseball league right there on their absolutely beautiful, stunningly beautiful property, their grounds. They cleared out a field, and it's like a field of dreams for real. And so that's me. Wow. Notice how I'm choking up on the bat there. The bats, everything was totally legit in terms of the equipment being used. And so those bats are not like modern baseball bats with the very thin handles, like the whip, you can whip around. So these are more like big clubs, and you often want to choke up a bit. But I'm taking a nice cut there, it looks like. And I was intimate. I really love that game. I loved it. This is me in my downstairs office around 2007, I think.
And so note the artwork behind him. We have the Temple of Athena Nike on the left behind Richard's head, and a classic bust on the right.
Absolutely, yeah. This is where I don't use that office as much these days, but I still have all my library there, and I'm still down there.
Yeah.
But I wrote all my books down there. This is the same office a couple of years later. That's a nice picture. Yeah. Probably around 2009 or 2010, I'm thinking. But I did all my book writing, other than the alien agendas, which I wrote up here where I'm sitting. But I did a lot of work, and all my resume writing work was down in that office. All the people I met with was there.
Going back in our personal history more than a few years, a photo of us drinking UFO beer in the home of our dear friend and colleague Jennifer Stein.
Jennifer, what a wonderful friend she is indeed.
The best.
And I don't remember that picture. I like that shot a lot.
No, it's a good beer. We endorse it.
Scores and scores of pictures of you and I together.
Here is at the end of the extraordinary, thank you, Steve Bassett Forever, National Press Club disclosure event from 2013. That's right. In Washington, D.C.
Yes, indeed.
This is a favorite of mine, taken either by Jeff or Donna Strauss at 2 a.m. in a diner in Pennsylvania, following a marathon double feature live performance with the original cast of Mystery Science Theater 3000, which we were all maniacs about. I remember we had laughed so hard, my face hurt. I was completely dehydrated, and we were in kind of an altered state. And
I love that picture. Oh my dear God!
Yes, this one speaks for itself.
Yeah, look at my hair. Look at that hair.
Looking good, man.
Well, that's one way to
Doing
say
our
it.
gang thing.
Yeah, I don't think we can do that today. I'm going to probably get in trouble too for that picture.
Well, me too.
Who gives a whatever? Okay, go on.
A wonderful moment from 2014 when we are billeted at the home of Marianne and the late Don Robb.
Oh yeah.
For Travis Walton's first conference, and Marianne, who was a big fan, was beside herself. She told me later, this was the greatest day of her life. I thought, gee.
A heart of gold.
Yes.
And a tough lady.
And a great police officer. In fact, I rode with her through starting at like whatever time it was, crazy o'clock for the check-in in get your assignments kind of thing. And I watched her in action, and she was remarkable. But the fact that they put the three of us up at her and Don's home was very special to her.
Well.
And we had a great time. And again, our dear friend, Stanton Friedman, one of the most important people in the history of UFO studies. This is, we're lucky enough to have a number of pictures with him.
I remember that night when we were sleeping over there. Oh, this is
my favorite
picture.
Yep.
Yeah, it was. The sunglasses were really important because it was a super sunny day.
Yeah.
Stan, though, he didn't do the sunglasses. I guess we did. We looked pretty bad there.
The only shot that the four of us will ever be together in.
We were at some. What was a dinosaur doing there? I can't remember.
This is right outside the county courthouse, where the whole Travis Walton story played out after the event. Yeah,
I like that picture. That's a fun picture. I forgot about it. Good one.
Now, at one point, you came to Ithaca on one of your trips, and we did a late night paranormal show. One of my favorite named shows.
Yes,
Where
indeed.
Did the Road Go? With Soraya, a wonderful host there, and a room especially for anybody who loves the world of the history of music. I think this room, and it's a nonprofit radio station up by the Cornell campus, they might have 30,000 record albums in it or more, all in alphabetical order, against two entire walls in a high ceiling room.
I really like that picture.
Pretty giddy, yeah.
Really like that. That's one of my faves of us.
And a year or so after this, you and I had the opportunity to travel to southern Brazil to speak at one of A.J. Javard's conferences there. And in our off time, we visited, I think, the greatest natural wonder, or one of them. I'd put it up there with the Grand Canyon and other world-class locations. It's a waterfall complex that goes on and on.
I'm trying to remember how to pronounce it.
I should have rehearsed it before. And Izaka.
Oh God! Everyone's gonna in the comments below. Anyway.
Also, we had the grand opportunity, and this is a photo you may or may not remember, but I love it. It's right up on top of the Acropolis
in Greece, yes,
with the Greek flag right behind us. And this is you speaking at the Contact with Space conference that got us there.
Yeah.
And in our off time, this would have been in the 2016 conference. Jenny took us to some wonderful locations, including this beautiful beach. And,
a cigarette out of someone's hand. Who's that?
I think that's Jenny.
Oh, okay.
The fact is, this is not the smartest way to try to make a living, although, bless you, Richard, you're able to do it. For me, though, the perks on the job are the people that you meet, as you know, some of the places you're lucky enough to get to. And for a period of time,
I really like that pictures. I'm happy. I like being
yes.
Pictures.
It's hard to not be happy in that moment.
Yeah.
And Jenny introduced us to a wonderful place that has closed since, but it will always live in our hearts. It's a quirky little outdoor restaurant run by one woman in the hills, and you would
remember this restaurant.
Yeah, what she had, and we are actually.
Woman's an amazing cook.
we have come into the end of our time. I am going to have to cut this off here, and you are simply going to have to come back, Richard M. Dolan.
Hey, Peter, thank you for this was just a lot of fun for me to review my life, honestly. And it
me too, my friend.
There's no time, but I want to thank you and your listeners for having me on.
Peter Robbins, Meanwhile Here on Earth, my guest, Richard Dolan. Follow him on YouTube, his website. See you next week. Bye for now.